Cairo, Seattle.
I feel like there should be a bell to start this off. No bell. It's Fight, an MMA podcast. I'm Danny O'Neill, and here with Bob Stelton, and this is our debut voyage, Bob.
This is it. Are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, you look ready.
I'm pretty excited.
I feel good.
I'm honestly very excited. MMA is something that I would say that I've followed pretty avidly over the past 10 years, but something I've never really covered or done in a professional sense. I've written some stories about it, but that's always been kind of more one and done, kind of quick paratrooper style reporting on the sport or on an athlete. And this is going to be a weekly session where we get together and talk, and you try to explain to me the art of punching a man in the face.
You know what I'm most excited about outside of explaining that stuff to you is that you get to show actually what you know. Because when we started tweeting out that this was happening, hey, it's coming, everybody get ready, I got a bunch of tweets about Danny O'Neill. What does he know about fighting? What does he know about MMA? And he's been following it longer than I have. He's dialed in. He understands what he's watching, and I'm excited for you to be able to sort of show that to people.
But it's from a very different perspective.
Right.
I'm someone that follows it from the couch. Bob is someone that has a wrestling dummy in his the basement room of his condo.
It's a grappling dummy.
Okay. It's not wrestling?
No.
Wrestling and grappling are different?
It's a little. There are elements that are similar, but it's technically a grappling dummy.
Okay. You've got a grappling dummy. At some point, I will be fighting the grappling dummy.
My odds are on you.
Yeah, the odds, but barely. It would be like 3-2, right? You would do that.
I think you'd gas out first. But.
That's probably true. I don't know if I would have as much staying power. But on our first episode, we're really excited. We're going to have Josh Barnett, who people should know him. He's been fighting professionally for 20 years. For 20 years. It's
just
really
about
remarkable.
every promotion there is.
Yes, he's fought in Japan. He's fought and tried to go and fight Fedor Emelianenko. He's fought for Pride. He's fought for Sengoku. There's a number of different. He's also the former heavyweight champion in the UFC.
He's done it all. He's done it all. He fought in Strikeforce as well, I believe. I mean, he's a guy that's fought everybody, done it all. Now he's doing commentary for wrestling as well, wrestling in Japan on Access TV. So he's well-traveled, he's well-schooled, and he understands what's going on in this sport.
And he's here. He's in town because there is a fight card this weekend there at the Emerald Queen. When you're going to be doing play-by-play.
Be doing play-by-play. It's a Super Fight League 50 team challenge, so it'll be Seattle versus Los Angeles is how they had Seattle versus Portland before, and I did the call on that, and I'll be doing it this weekend, and he's going to be cornering some fighters out there. We'll talk to him about his involvement, exactly what he's going to be doing. I'll also be on the broadcast with Tony Parrish, former University of Washington superstar and former 49er will be on the call. He's involved with Super Fight League.
Now, here's one thing you're going to have to ask Tony. Tony's into some wild healing remedies.
Okay.
Tony's a drink snake venom kind of guy.
Okay.
Like he's got some funky. So I want you to be able to ask that. Tony's a great athlete. He actually was there at the University of Washington about the same time Brock Heward was a teammate with Brock Heward, former second-round pick, someone. So that is all happening this weekend, and we will talk to Josh Barnett just a little bit later in this podcast. But one of the things that Josh has probably got the best view on is the overall arc of the UFC and MMA promotions in general, but the UFC being something that came into consciousness in 1993, and I think if I've got the history right, Josh watched that as maybe a sophomore in high school and saw it, the kind of the sideshow element that it was when it started. He's now fought professionally for 20 years, and we've just had the sale of the UFC, which in some ways, in my mind, kind of completes the sport's trajectory from that sideshow circus it started as to a regulated, sanctioned sport to something that now, look, they bought it. Zuffa bought it in 2001, so 15 years later. They bought it for $2 million, and essentially they bought the debt. They bought a big shoebox full of credit card slips to get the promotion, which was then being held. They were holding fights at the Biloxi Casino. It was basically South Riverboat gambling fighting is where the cards were then being held and sold for $4 billion, Bob.
It's unbelievable to even think that. And listen, I give them all the credit in the world. I don't know that they had the vision to think it's going to be this one day. Now, I'll give Dana White credit because I've been talking to Dana White for years, back when the UFC was still losing money, as according to him, back in 2006, 2007. Talking to him, says they still weren't turning a profit. Even back then, he's like, this is going to be the biggest sport in the world. You just watch. And he kept saying that. We'd all go, come on, man. And I'm not saying it is by any stretch, but it's a lot further than I think even I anticipated it being because it's become mainstream. It's become part of of what people look at when they go to ESPN.com. It's front page when there's news in MMA or UFC. It's front page stuff. John Jones, Brock Lesnar, these things that are going on. Chad Mendez, Holly Holm winning, beating Ronda Rousey. These are huge front page stories on mainstream publications, mainstream websites that were really reluctant to cover the sport for a long time. And I think their hand has been forced. The ratings have been there. The pay-per-view has been there. And it's a sport that has absolutely exploded to a level that I didn't ever really anticipate. And I don't think it's done. I don't think it's done getting bigger.
If you're a fight fan, you watch MMA. And generally that means you watch the UFC, which is the biggest promotion. And that's not to say there aren't other promotions worth watching and Bellator and those things. But if you're a fight fan, now there are some people that really like boxing and will always sort of look down. And that's a stylistic thing. But honestly, and this is how I look at it, if you're a fight fan, you like MMA because boxing does not put on the bouts people want to see. And in mixed martial arts, for the most part, you end up getting to see the fights that you want to see.
Well, and I'm an old school boxing fan. I grew up boxing. I started boxing when I was 7 years old. You know, my dad turned me on to Sugar Ray Leonard and talked to me about Muhammad Ali and really just told me about the sort of the glory of being the heavyweight champion. At one point, being the heavyweight champion, you were the most popular, most well-known person on the earth, right? I mean, in all of sports, there was nothing higher than being the heavyweight champion of the world. That has since gone completely opposite, 180. Now they're obscure. Nobody knows who they are unless you're a boxing geek like myself. And I kind of got turned on to MMA for the very reason you just said. First of all, it was interesting to see the other elements of fighting, the other disciplines that I wasn't familiar with. But boxing often would promote this huge headlining card, right? Whether it was Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran. Then they'd have a stack of undercard fights of guys you've never heard of. So if the main event didn't live up to the billing, you felt ripped off. You felt like, man, that was the one fight I was looking forward to, and it stunk. And then you'd have Don King sitting in the ring going, oh, man, didn't we have a beautiful night, waving his flag? No, you didn't. The card was garbage. The main event was a dud. You know, so you fast forward to the UFC, their cards are stacked. And there's none of this Floyd Mayweather nonsense of I'm not fighting this guy, I'll fight this guy, I'm not fighting that guy, dictating the terms of who they're going to fight. Dana White and the Fertittas and everybody there that puts these fights together, to their credit, say, no. The best fight the best in their prime. That's how it works. You don't want to fight? Somebody else will step up and do it. And I love that. I love that there's none of this BS of a guy going, nah, I'm not fighting that guy. I want to fight somebody easy. I want to make some money. I'm going to sit here and cherry pick my opponents the way Floyd Mayweather did his entire career once he got the power. It's embarrassing, and it's what's killed boxing. And boxing has become a fringe sport. And I'm a boxing fan, and there are a ton of fighters I've never heard of. I'll stumble upon it every once in a while and go, yeah, he looks good. Nobody knows who he is. Nobody has any idea. But the UFC, they stack their cards. So even if the main event falls flat, isn't what we thought it was going to be, you had a million great matchups with familiar names, and they're fighting each other in their prime.
Now, there are two things that come up, because I agree with everything you just said. Two things that come up from the sale. You mentioned Dana White and the Fertittas. Now, Dana White's still going to be involved. The Fertittas are, in a sense, kind of cashing out. They were the money behind the purchase of the UFC, the promotion of the UFC. When Dana White talks about them going into debt and not making money, it was the Fertittas and their family, which owns the Station Casinos. We're going to see changes, and there's two people that can affect. The group is the fighters, how this is going to impact them. The other one is the fans. And speaking from a fan's perspective, the worry, question, concern that I have about the direction is, are we going to see the UFC under its new leadership go more in the direction of boxing, or are we still going to see the kind of fights promoted and the cards put together? I think in some ways that's kind of the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, and I think as long as Dana and everybody that's involved in terms of the matchmaking there is still there, right? The Fertittas weren't involved with the matchmaking. They're the business guys. They're the money guys. As long as Dana's still involved and you've got the circle of people around him that put these fights together, I think it remains the same. I think it does. I think they understand that's why we've been able to grow as fast as we have. That's why we've been able to kind of suck some of the life out of boxing and bring some of those people over, because we are matching the best against the best in their prime. As far as the other things, I have no idea what it means. I've had a couple fighters on that I've talked to saying, what does this mean? And they're like, I don't know. Wait and see. It could mean more pay for them, but you got a lot of fighters who are under contract. So does the new owner come in and just rip up all contracts and start over? I don't see that happening. But maybe once these contracts expire, maybe it's more beneficial. Hey, the new one's going to be better. I don't know. I don't know what it means in terms of fighter pay. I don't know what it means about the growth of the sport, other than I think there's even more money behind it. So I expect it to continue to grow. But It really is an unknown. I don't know what it means. I don't know if we as fans will really see a difference. It could be completely negligible in terms of what the fans see.
And you say that we won't see a difference, which would be great news for anybody that likes fights and likes the way that they're promoted. From the fighter's perspective, the interesting sort of dynamics that come out is you wouldn't expect a company like WME IMG, which is what bought it. You would not expect a company to come in there and after looking at all the balance sheets and everything coming in and say, you know what we need to do? We need to pay more money to the employees. We just gave $4 billion to the overall entity, and we're going to do it. But they're also going to face a challenge because, in large part, Dana White and the Fertittas' success in promoting came from the understanding that these guys aren't just ruthless suits. They're fight fans. And they care about the fighters. They care about the product. They care about the overall business. Now, a lot of fighters will have different opinions, and I know that Dana White, as much as I like him as a promoter for the events he puts on, there are fighters that have very strong opinions about how much money the fighters have received out of the UFC's profits. But that's going to be something, there's been a very personal relationship between the promotion and the fighters. I'll be really interested to see how that's impacted by this.
I agree with that. But I'm curious to see how much some of these guys sort of being pilfered by Bellator is going to affect the UFC. If they're going to look at that, they're fringe guys, not a big deal. We don't care about Benson Henderson. We don't care about Josh Thompson. We don't care about any of these other guys that have Matt Mitrione and Rampage Jackson. I mean, they've lost some names over there. Now it's not George St. Pierre. It's not Ronda Rousey. It's not Conor McGregor. It's not your meal ticket, so to speak. But Benson Henderson's a guy in his prime that they lost, right, in free agency, if you will. Rory McDonald is now a free agent. He said he's going to explore his options. So you've got some fairly well-known names that have left or looking around and seeing it. So I'll be curious to see how they counter that. Are they going to be more aggressive in retaining their talent, or are they going to, Dana's always kind of got an attitude like, we're fine. That guy's past his prime. We're fine. So is the emphasis going to be on let's keep the talent? Let's keep the young talent that we have here. Let's make sure that they're happy here and we retain their services. Or are they going to still continue with, hey, he can leave, there's somebody else right behind him?
Yeah, or we can just make Brock Lesnar fight a bunch more. Now, this is this we all know Brock Lesnar fought in UFC 200, and we're going to get into the ramifications of the drug test violations that have come up. And he's tested positive twice for a substance, actually reportedly the same substance that John Jones tested positive for, one of those substances.
By the way, he was critical of John Jones
after
John's
was.
dirty test.
Yeah, he told him he was unprofessional, right? And then he said, "Merry Christmas" to Brock Lesnar. But I want to get it. This is a different clip because it's not. It sort of speaks to the UFC didn't make a deal with the devil to get Lesnar in there, but it certainly was something we're unaccustomed to seeing, which was they brought in a pro wrestler with an opportunity to promote some of the WWE's product, their video game as well as their SummerSlam, and it led to a question that I think shows, well, maybe some of the intellectual depth that Brock Lesnar brought to the promotion.
And obviously, Brock, I know you've dealt with, with questions about performance-enhancing drugs your entire career. That's nothing new. You've had to answer those questions. But I'm kind of curious, your reaction to some of the stuff that Mark has said, even if you've seen it, where he said that, he believes you've been juicing your whole life, and he had questions about USADA testing you. I mean, what is your reaction? Is that just kind of more of what you've always heard?
I've been dealing with that my entire life. I'm a white boy, and I'm jacked. Deal with it. So what do you want me to say? I'm a white boy and I'm jacked. Deal with it.
He's a thinker.
He's an idiot. He's an idiot.
He's a thinker.
First of all, what does white boy have to do with it? Why draw that distinction? Right? That was the first thing I thought. Why was that necessary to draw that distinction? Yeah. I think we're clear on your ethnicity. Listen, I get that he's a popular figure in wrestling. I'm not a wrestling fan, so I don't know much about him as a wrestler. I watched him as a fighter, and he captured the belt, and he's a big behemoth, and if he gets you on the ground, he's going to hold you down, and he can hurt you. I don't think he's a great fighter. I think he's a big, strong guy who's clearly got some chemical additives that help him out. So I think that it's funny, first of all, that he criticized Jones, that he had that comment out there. He was very, very just out there with it, right? Like, I'm above this, and these guys are cheating, and I'm used to this, and I just love that it got thrown back in his face. I really enjoy that. I don't think it's great for the sport. I don't think nobody's surprised. Nobody's surprised. So it's not like, oh, goodness, what does this mean for the sport? What does it mean for the UFC? Well, this was a one-off. There was potential of another fight, but they struck a deal. He's still under contract with WWE. So in the grand scheme of things, his testing dirty, what does it do to the sport? Nothing. I think it's like everybody going, oh, yeah, and it's the sky is blue and water is wet. Big deal. He's using PEDs.
The positive test for Brock Lesnar is one thing. Adding it onto the heels of the test from John Jones.
That doesn't help.
Coming in a year in which Anderson Silva also tested positive, and now news of Chad Mendez. We've got some questions to ask about not the rigorousness of the testing, because in some ways this is what you'd expect. The UFC escalated their testing procedures. They are more stringent under the USADA, under the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. They're more stringent testing than the NFL. And some of their top fighters are getting busted. What does that mean for the sport going forward? How should we make sense of that? And well, are we not going to see as many white boys who are jacked and we have to deal with it?
Moron.
That's all ahead on Fight. We've also got Josh Barnett, former UFC heavyweight champion, and Ballard High Beaver. He's going to be joining us here on Fight.
I'm a white boy, and I'm jacked. Deal with it.
Such an idiot. Can't stand that guy.
It is Fight, an MMA podcast, and we're joined now by our first guest. Josh Barnett is with us, and Josh has made a living 20 years in the fight game. I was looking back. Someone who roots here in the Northwest, went to Ballard High School. Josh, thank you so much for joining us.
That's my pleasure to be here.
Now, we were talking about and started the show speaking about the sale of the UFC and what that might mean for the promotion, and you're probably pretty uniquely situated to talk about the dynamics of how promotions worked, given the places that you've worked. You've worked in Japan, worked in the U.S. What do you make of the news, and is it going to have any sort of trickle-down effect for the fighters?
Well, the news at this point is really just news. You know what I mean? It's sound bites, it's bits of information here or there, but it really doesn't amount to a whole lot from the perspective of somebody as an athlete or as anybody that would be considered an individual contractor within this scenario, which us athletes are. But that's also mainly because pertinent information, how policy is going to be affected from here. I mean, all that kind of stuff. We have zero information in regards to that. It's just sort of it's like the rumor is that there's a sale going on, that these groups are vying for it and the UFC is for sale, and or it has been purchased or anything in and around that. Only for, one guy to come out there, and go, no, there's no sale. Nothing's for sale. No, that's completely bullcrap. That's all a rumor. None of that's true. Then to be like, oh, well, okay, yeah, it is, then to have to admit that it's true. So, I mean, there's a lot of misdirection and disinformation. Mm-hmm. I don't know about if everybody necessarily is familiar with the idea of disinformation, but it's purposeful, incorrect information to create a false belief set to steer you away from the truth. So there's a lot of that goes on all the time. In business, it's nothing new. And so everything to me is basically disinformation in terms of the sale. So I'm not saying that they don't necessarily have reasons for it, but from my perspective, I can't really consider that information as useful in terms of how I'm going to operate within that structure, where I fit in. And so at this point, really anything could change. I mean, we might all have to start fighting in pink tutus, and no punches legal unless you scream hot dog. I mean, any of that could be enacted. It is.
It's a good visual.
Yeah. So those are all possibilities, I suppose. A future that I look forward to.
It seems like the hope, and I've had a million people ask me, well, what does it mean?
That's the hope. That's your vision for MMA.
Hot dog.
Well,
and I thought I created it right now.
Here it comes. No, I think the hope, it seems like, from people's fans that are incredibly invested in the salaries of fighters and really get into the fact that they feel like you're underpaid, you're not compensated properly. And we hear it from former fighters, and I think the hope from a lot of people that are a fan of the sport is, okay, now the fighters are going to get paid. But then I look at it and go, well, I don't know that the new owners would come in and just rip up everybody's contracts and say, let's start over. I don't see it now. Maybe once your contract expires, maybe they negotiate on a different level. But in terms of what were real tangible changes, I don't know what we're going to see on that level in terms of matchmaking. I think as a fan, it's probably going to be business as usual.
Well, matchmaking-wise, the same people that do the matchmaking for the UFC are still the same people in charge there, and I would easily go on record to say that they are not replaceable.
Joe
or
Silva
I should
and-
say not easily replaceable. Joe Silva, Sean Shelby. To create a replacement for them, if you wanted to get rid of them against their wishes, would take so much effort, would be so hard to keep silent that, of course, they would get upset at some point and then just take off, and you would be left in a really, really difficult scenario. And only with, I would think, with like their support and bidding could you really raise up and create the right replacement. But and it's not reasonable to think that a company would come in and tear up all those contracts. I mean, that would be such a massive headache to try and do such a thing. Not to mention, I mean, you did sign a contract, and that was the terms at the time, and they may seem lousy to you in retrospect, but that is what it is. And if a company could do what it could consider reasonable to try and create some sort of balance with that, but I mean, to just destroy contracts and rewrite them. I mean, if you've ever seen a contract, even if it was 5 pages, that's enough to go through. Now, if you imagine you had 300 athletes that you needed to go through on that's 300 sets of 5 pages that are all going to, and not
new
every
negotiations for each
not
one.
every, yeah, right. So, but a UFC contract has never been anywhere near 5 pages. It's like, I think it's like 35 or something. It's a novella. So that I don't see that happening. And in a philosophical sense, I mean, if a company could come in and they have their expenditures as has been budgeted, and they can look at their projections based on what their current pay scale and overhead and income is, and why would they want to pay you more if they could continue? In fact, if they could pay you less, let's say, if they are devoid of ethics, they would. I mean, if you were just a commodity that if it could be bought for cheaper or replaced and used for something for cheaper, then it is arguably, you could presume that someone may take that attitude, right? So to say that someone would be magnanimous would be nice, but that's not necessarily so.
We're talking with Josh Barnett here. He's got a fight coming up with the UFC. That'll be September 3rd in Germany. You're fighting Andrei Arlovsky. You're also going to be cornering an event tomorrow night down at the Emerald Queen, which has got to be a pretty exciting opportunity as well.
It is. And for me, I like to come back up to the Northwest for any excuse I can. It's even better when I can make somebody else pay for my plane ticket. But I don't know if he contacted Alaska Airlines to have them lose my luggage, but
this might be part of the new UFC ownership. They're not able to get your bags here. It starts there. Maybe they're going to have a pink tutu for you.
Yelling hot dog.
Could be. But I really am a firm believer in giving back what you've been given. And so with this is an opportunity for me to bring athletes that I work with up here to have an opportunity to fight for this promotion, which has been around, done a great job. And I've had athletes fight for them before, very well taken care of, great visibility, and they've done a great job for them. So this is a fantastic opportunity for them to be in a quality place, taken care of, and given opportunity.
And Bob's going to be doing play-by-play.
That's right. I will be on the call. It'll be a Super Fight League 50, by the way, out there at Emerald Queen Casino. Team LA versus Team Seattle. Any conflict on your part because you're from here? You went to Ballard High School, yet you're representing Team LA.
Well, I didn't leave the Northwest because I was tired of the Northwest. I left Seattle because of the opportunities that were available to me in LA. And even though I'm a professional athlete, and it was sad to say, and I don't know necessarily what the climate is here now, but back then MMA wasn't very well supported or cared about. There was people that cared about us as individuals, and there were people that did enjoy and support MMA, but not like, I mean, I would take a trip to Southern California And I just walk into the cell phone store to buy a charger, and people would know who I am. I'm getting discounts for this. I've got any number of places I could go to get chiropractic work or massage work or all these things, either pro bono or at an incredibly reasonable rate. There's all these fight gyms. There's all of this opportunity, all this just resource available to me as an MMA fighter. And of course, I'm an athlete, but I'm working entertainment. No one's just watching because they care about the athletics sporting aspect of it. Just they want to pay to see a fight. They're paying to be entertained. And so I'm working in entertainment, and therefore when I wanted to branch out from that with doing TV and movie stuff and everything else like that, and anything that could come from being, I hate to say it, a brand as an athlete or anything as a professional. There's so much more opportunity there. It's a bigger media market. It's a bigger entertainment base. But I love Seattle. This is where I was born, and this is where I intend to die. So I'm glad to be back up here. And I wouldn't say that I'm not an Angelino, because I don't live on the surface in Los Angeles. I feel like I know its very heart and its very core, and it's a wonderful, amazing city. It's not Seattle. Not to say that it's about better or worse in this case, but they're very, very different. And it's kind of tough to be up here, but to coach against Seattle as a Seattleite. But I can stand to deal with it, to approach it as an Angelino of sorts. But it's just going to be funny to me, because I've already had one person on Twitter, because I retweeted and put a comment about how we're bringing some great talent up here to showcase on this fight card, only to have somebody tweet me about saying something like, "Oh, well, we are gonna blah blah blah," and something us, and I'm just going, "Who is we? Who's us? Who are you even talking about?"
Is he on the card?
And she was a Brent Knopp supporter, and so I'm going, but she's referring to we and us. I'm like, okay, yeah, right. Are you on the card? Are you one of the coaches? Like, who are you? I don't know who you are. And then the response was, LOL, blah, 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 AMC. I'm like, LOL? What's funny about the response of your use of pronouns is incredibly vague. And at the same time, I had to respond, look, you do realize that I was a person who trained at AMC and has trained at AMC likely longer than almost anybody else. Like, there's like barely a handful of people that that spent time at AMC longer than me. No response then at that point. I'm just like,
well, don't let facts get in the way of that.
I know Brent, not very well, because he was a noob by the time, I was really kind of leaving the gym, now he's built himself a career out there, up here, and has had a lot of great fights, and he's a real eminent star here in the Northwest at his weight class, in and around that light heavyweight area, or light heavyweight division. So I have nothing against Brett or any of that, or definitely not against AMC, but in this case, he's an opponent for this great kid I brought up here, Adam DeHart from North Carolina, who's a student of a legendary Carney catch wrestler, Billy Wicks, who just recently passed away. So, I'm up here to give this shot to Adam DeHart. Adam has trained with and been around a lot of people that I greatly respect, like Billy Wicks, Pops, and I want to see this kid get his opportunity to go out there, because as great as Brent is he's tough, he's super tough, he's AMC trained. That means he's smart. He's got a great corner, and from what I know of Brent, he's a good guy. But he seems to want to stay here and just fight here and be around here. Adam DeHart wants to go out there. He wants to conquer the world. He wants to wrestle everywhere. He wants to fight everywhere. He wants to go out there and be an athlete that travels the kind of paths like Matt Hume did, like me, like others. He wants to see this world, through one set of ring ropes at a time. Brent wants to stay here. Brent can stay here, but we want Brent to stay here just, with 2 losses on his record now, and maybe instead of 1.
That will be part of the card on Saturday night. And Josh talking about AMC, Matt Hume's gym out there in Kirkland, a longtime establishment here. I'll ask you, Josh, because you talk about making a career and traveling and seeing the world one set of ropes at the time. It's kind of what you've done, a career that goes back to 1997 as a pro fighter. You've been the UFC heavyweight champion. I'd like to ask you, has it become easier to support yourself as a professional fighter? I think it's a remarkable accomplishment, what you've done in 20 years. What's it like? Is it becoming easier for the next Josh Barnett to kind of walk that path?
Far and above easier. Matt could tell you, I can tell you, anybody could go on about how, I was just, Matt he didn't really give me an ultimatum, but what he said to me was, after my second fight in the UFC, my first ever loss, he goes, look, man, you need to do this full time. You need to be in the gym all the time. You can't be doing this and splitting time with jobs right now. You need to be able to put all your eggs in one basket. And so I knew he was right. So I did. And I suffered for it, and I didn't make hardly anything fighting back then. And we did what we could, and I came into the UFC fighting for 3,000 and 3,000. And nowadays, I think a minimum contract is 10 and 10, possibly 15 and 15. Things are much better. I wouldn't say that even at 10 and 10, that allows you I don't want to use the word luxury because I don't feel that's really the right word, but it doesn't give you the cushion to be a full-time fighter. Mm-hmm. I think that you should still have a part-time job of some sort, call that what you may in terms of how you put your hours in and how it works, because there's a lot of ways to make money nowadays. It didn't exist necessarily when I was fighting. Crack cocaine was just such an easy side job.
Such a great avenue.
Yeah. That's really dwindled. But damn PSAs. But
it's Nancy Reagan's fault, man. There's a burgeoning market there.
So didn't she look like some sort of strange bird?
Yes, completely agree.
Her head looked like she was like some sort of gray, one of the grays, the aliens, the long, gray, skinny with the big bulbous tops of their heads with pointy chins. Anyways. Anyhow,
so it is easier to make a living then.
It is far easier. There's so much opportunity. And when I started going to Japan, it was because it was a far superior market to here. I was fighting in front of 30 to 50,000 people every time. Other fighters had shown that there was the opportunity to do commercials for things like Gillette or Schick razors over there or something like that. I've seen Kentucky Fried Chicken, your normal sort of media commercial marketing crap, but them being able to be attached to it. That means they're getting paid for it. That means they're getting sponsorship. The first time Reebok sponsored anything, it was a regional deal. Now, these are all regional deals, but regional Reebok sponsored an MMA fighter over there. Regional Fila sponsored an MMA fighter. Regional Nike sponsored a fighter over there. That did not exist. We sat over here just being envious as all could be that a company like Nike would want to use this guy in ads, Kaoruno, and give him support in terms of clothing and wear. And back when I first started fighting, if you could get $300 to fight, $600 to fight, that was like, wow, okay, cool, that's cash, it's nice. But it's such a much bigger media market now. I mean, it is a worldwide sport, and it always has been. But from the UFC now, it's a worldwide platform there of which you can monetize it for yourself. But then, to a certain point, once you start to come up those ranks, then the issues of pay and versus, who you are in terms of not just your record. It's not just that, but in terms of your popularity, how much pull do you have versus how much, how many ads are you putting in seats versus how much you're getting paid for it, and how many media markets are you big in versus what you're getting paid. I mean, as you become more popular, that's when it becomes more of an issue of where does that pay fall in the line, and how does it become equitable.
I wanted to ask you about one of the other big things going on in the UFC right now. We were talking about it before we started recording, and that is the recent, I guess, rash of fighters testing dirty. We saw John Jones, followed by Brock Lesnar, now followed by Chad Mendez. We've seen Anderson Silva. It's had. I mean, you've had issues with it in the past. There's a different set of testing in place now with USADA. As a guy that's in the middle of it, you're still in the middle of your career here with the UFC. Do you look at this as a good thing? People looking at it going, good, it's cleaning up the sport. This is good. Or is it on the other side where guys are taking supplements they've always taken and maybe they're not doing their due diligence? It's hard to know who to believe. And you see John Jones up there crying, going, I'm not a cheater. I don't even know how to pronounce what it was I tested dirty for. Maybe some of that's true. I don't know that anybody gets the benefit of the doubt anymore. But as a fighter who's been through it and you're watching it with some big names now, how do you feel about what's going on out there? Is it a good thing?
Well, it's definitely given something for people to talk and write about.
Right.
So, I mean, I suppose it could be a good thing on one side and a bad thing on the other. I guess it's a bad thing if you're dealing with a 2-year ban like Mendez is. But do I believe John Jones? No. But I can't say that he's necessarily a liar either. I just don't even get myself involved in things in that nature simply because I don't know John Jones. So I can't really make too much of a personal distinction on that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a part of professional athletics in general. And I think if you USADA MLB, I don't know if it would be worse, better. I don't know what it would look like. Or the NFL or college football.
Yep.
I mean, yes, they use standards like WADA and things like that, but they don't get tested the same level as we do. So it's with all that stringent testing, are you finding cheaters? Yes, I'm sure you are. Are you also finding outliers that just took a supplement over the counter that has been tainted somehow? Yeah, probably too. Because you're increasing the pool and you're increasing the chances by the number of tests you're taking. But then that's also tricky because who's going to test all those supplements? So I guess the biggest thing is you'd want to stick with anything that has, there's certain branding on some of these supplements to say that they've been put through a system that says that they are accredited by these labels being put on them, that they are completely free of any potential banned substance. But you also got to keep your eyes on that list at all times, because the reality is, even though a system may want to clean up a sport, let's say, or to try and create what they consider an even playing field in terms of supplementation, let's say, because it's not a banned substance until they say it is, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, so they've deigned that certain things should not be allowed and certain ones should, until they decide that with more research or more thought or just a hair up their ass that one shouldn't be either, and then that goes on to that list. They're not really going to be too personally concerned about you and whether it affects you. For them, it's a sort of a amorphous it and us. So it being the sport and its athletes are all just sort of one thing, and us being our decisions on what is best. And therefore, we're going to enact our policy, and then here you go. Here's our outline. It's like, but the reality is, you're it, and we're us, and you're just either going to fall in the cracks or you're not.
How does it? What is the process? Let's say there's a supplement company that says, "Josh, we want you to endorse our new line of creatine or glutamine powder or whatever." Do you give it to your manager and say, "Hey, get this checked out. Is it on the list? Is it not on the list? Are they credible? What's the protocol if you're looking into a new supplement, a new multivitamin, something maybe you haven't taken before?"
I would say, if it was a company wanting me to sponsor it, first off, it'd be pay me a crap ton of money,
right.
Put my face all over it, and then, if they don't go through those testing standards, then I just won't take it. But I'll still take the money.
You'll endorse it, but not take it.
That's an honest man.
Yeah, baby got kids to feed. They're out there. Look, there's like two big bodies that look over these things. I don't remember the names of them off the top of my head. One is like NSF. The other one is something else. Just stick with those. You'll be fine. I think that's really the best way to go about it. And other than that, don't even take the risk, because the reality is no one gives a crap if you made a mistake. They'll go, oh, that's unfortunate. 2 years.
And most of the time, like we said, you don't have any slack anymore. Fans and media, they don't believe I didn't know. They don't accept that.
Fans and media don't want to believe I didn't know. I didn't know doesn't create clicks. I didn't know doesn't give you a right to be, or doesn't give you the feeling to be some sort of person in a position to pass judgment over somebody. It doesn't give you the right to have your opinion as strongly as you do in somebody else's eyes. I believe, so taking a stance that isn't judgmental, that isn't with a strong opinion to litter the message boards with, doesn't really do anything. It doesn't interest people. So why would they?
He is Josh Barnett. We're really grateful for you spending the time to talk with us here.
Highly doubt that.
No, it's true. I mean, look, we got hot dog before throwing a punch, the pink tutu, and also slanging crack rock.
Right,
that was
slanging.
Also, yeah,
just not the business it used to be.
No. It's really the market's dried up. We thought it was a growth industry. It turned out to be otherwise. He is going to be at Super Fight League 50. That card is on Saturday. He'll be cornering there the team Los Angeles, though he's a born and bred Northwesterner. Josh, we
Ballard,
really
Yashar, you bitch.
we really appreciate it, Josh.
Thanks.
Welcome back to Fight, an MMA podcast. I'm Danny O'Neill here along with Bob Stelton and our first guest, Josh Barnett. I think it's really kind of fitting. We are based in Seattle. We're going to talk about more than just the Northwest fight scene, but Josh Barnett is one of the pioneers of this sport and someone who has been fighting professionally for really 20 years now. 1997 was his debut. He's fought in Pride. He's fought in the UFC. He's been the UFC heavyweight champion, and it was cool to hear his view of both the expansion of the sport and kind of the questions about where it goes next.
Yeah, and the ways that he made money in the past selling crack cocaine and now just doing it full-time as a fighter. He was kidding, by the way, but it was very funny. But he has been in it a long time. You're right. He's been able to really live the evolution, right? Be in the middle of it, and he's gone through multiple nickname changes in that time. The baby-faced assassin to War Master now and all these different things. So he is a core fighter who's been there, and he had some great insight. And he's the perfect example for the people that always come to me saying, it's a bunch of meatheads who are a bunch of dummies that are bar fighters. And it's like, I keep telling them, I'm like, no, you don't understand. These aren't the palookas of old in boxing that didn't graduate high school and can't put two words together. Anybody that listened to him, I mean, he's a really well-spoken, introspective person. He's a very intelligent guy, and he's not unique. This sport is littered with guys that are college grads that have really excelled in terms of their education. He's a very smart guy, and really interesting, good sense of humor. I love the guy.
Yeah. When he's able to critique your use of pronouns or LOL on Twitter, you got to watch out. No, I think what you said there, Bob, is really important because there are people who don't see this as a way to punch someone in the face so much as a way to challenge themselves,
right?
To grow. And they believe, look, if you're a fight fan, you're going to like the UFC. I believe that. Mm-hmm. If you don't like fights, you're probably not going to like it. There is a level of physical aggression, and it's a combat sport. But the people who participate, and really the people who excel, that tough guy, the guy that thinks nobody can ever beat him up, he lasts half a day at the gym, or he's like me and he never gets there.
Right. It's a different world. And I've seen guys even in training jiu-jitsu. I've seen guys that come in and they're the loud guy at the bar. They're the guy that can beat up everybody. And you go in there and you get humbled by a guy who's half your size, right? I mean, I grew up boxing. I grew up feeling like if I get in a scrape, I feel pretty good about my chances. I started jiu-jitsu and I got tapped out by a guy who was 70 pounds lighter than me within 30 seconds. I didn't know what to do. Fight on the ground. All of a sudden, I'm getting pretzeled there. I'm going, what the hell's going on? Ow, 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 stop. So it's interesting, and you're right about just that attitude from those that don't really know what they're getting into or what these people do and what they're capable of doing, and just how much of a chess match it is and how intricate. It's not the bar fight as much as it may look like it at times. It's not just two big mouths slugging it out and whoever can last the longest is going to win. It's such an intriguing chess match, and there's so much that goes into it, and a lot of intelligence into it, and there's a humbleness that goes along with it, and a respect that goes along with it that I think is really unique.
So why did you ask Barnett to put me in a go-go choke?
Well, I thought that was going to just be part of the podcast. I thought we were going to teach Danny new tricks every podcast, whether we show him, demonstrate upon him, or, somebody else, but preferably on you.
Now, the go-go choke is what Ben Rothwell applied to Josh Barnett.
Yeah.
The submission victory. And what you described it to me, it's similar to a guillotine, except maybe you use your thumb as like
kind of the knuckle is what I was guessing, because I watched that. I tried to see, because they asked Ben after the fight, hey, what were you doing there? He's like, well, it's a secret. It's our little trick. And I never got a real clear shot, but what it looked like, it was a guillotine and really kind of driving the knuckle of the thumb up in there. It was hard to tell. I could be completely off. I was trying to sit there and rewatch so I could do it to somebody. But it was really hard to tell, and I don't think he was really excited to show us the move that had forced him to tap out.
No, what he explained is usually you needed to do that to a girl was something, and I'm not sure if that was directed at what exactly it was. We tell him that, like, you're going to be able to squeeze a whole lot here, Josh. You're going to have to squeeze past a whole lot of layers of fat before you get something means something.
Yeah, harder. I don't feel anything. Hurry.
Yeah, you tired of wrestling with that marshmallow? No, it was really fun. He had some important things to say about PEDs.
Right.
And what is happening with the sport. And I think it's something we're all learning. The thing that struck me most about what he had to say is that I think so many people look at PEDs as a moral issue and that it's a moral failing when someone takes PEDs. When the reality is that you have a list of substances that go from being okay to being cheating, depending on if they're on a list or not.
Right.
And that's not to say that the people that make the lists are wrong or whatever, but that it is possible for someone to not be thinking, I need something extra illegal to get an edge, but they're trying to do something to accelerate their training, something to, like creatine, and that there's much more gray area than people realize, and that's not to excuse people that violate it. It's mostly that I think PEDs, instead of viewing them as a moral issue, we view it as what he said, which is this is part of professional sports to varying degrees. And these are the rules that have been set in place in the UFC. And if the UFC is going to have as stringent a testing as it has had for the past year, we should not be surprised when it ends up catching people, and at times catching people who, whether they're telling the truth or not, claim that they didn't use the substance.
Yeah, and I just want to believe some of these guys. I want to believe John Jones as he sits up there and cries at the podium, a guy who's been incredibly outspoken on the issue, right? I mean, he looks like such a hypocrite because he was so outspoken about cheaters and not needing anything to achieve what he's achieved, and then all of a sudden, boom, he pops dirty out of nowhere. There's a part of me that wants to really believe that, man, he was just irresponsible and took something he didn't check out. That's why I wanted to know what the protocol was. If you get this new supplement, what do? You talked about the list is constantly being updated. So maybe something he'd been taking for years and years and years that was okay, and they said, nope, that's no longer a valid supplement. That's no longer something that we're going to allow. Did he miss the memo? Did his manager miss the memo? What's the process? Are they getting updated emails? Hey, by the way, here's the updated list of all banned substances. I don't know how it works, so I don't know how easy it would be to mess up in that sense. But it always comes back to you're responsible for what you put in your body. But I do believe there's an element of ignorance, oversight, I guess, if you will, or just, whoa, I didn't realize this was illegal anymore. And it's not just in this sport. We saw it with tennis. We saw, you see it in every sport. There's somebody that says, I've been taking this the whole time. I didn't realize it was on the list now. So are these guys lying a lot of the times? I'm sure they are. But it's unfortunate because I think it hurts the sport when one of the biggest names, one of the greatest champions they've ever seen in John Jones is now potentially out for 2 years, and we'll see what happens with that big dope Brock Lesnar and Chad Mendez.
I'm a white boy, and I'm jacked. Deal with it.
What a stooge. Such a stooge. And you know what? He may have done it accidentally. I don't think so, but that possibility does exist.
He definitely looks like someone who he would be beyond reproach, right? Like it seems like, oh, wait, no, he looks engineered.
Yeah.
He looks like a Korean War experiment.
Well, what I loved is that story came out. There's BJPenn.com says pros react to Brock Lesnar testing dirties. So they basically got a page full of tweets from a bunch of different fighters, and every one of them is, oh, boy, he's dirty? Who would have thought? And just sarcastic tweet after sarcastic tweet, just, no way, say it isn't so, Brock. He became one of the most obvious poster boys for performance-enhancing drugs, whether he's tested dirty in the past or not. People look at him and go, come on. Yeah. Come on. So he was probably the least surprising individual that could have ever popped dirty for a test.
Well, this is a conversation that will be continuing, and part of this is that fighters don't have their own lobbying firm. They don't have something, a union, like an NFL players union, things to advocate for them. These are all parts of the discussion that we're going to have about the fight game. We'll be doing it every week. It's Fight and MMA Podcast. This was our debut episode. We hope you enjoyed it. We'd also like to encourage you, this is the part where we pander. And the way that I pander is by saying rate, review us on iTunes. It's actually pretty important. It is a debut podcast. It is something that Bob and I are committed to doing going forward. But if you enjoyed it, we'd like you to share it with people and pass it around, because that's the way that this will be continued. You can also follow us on Twitter, and that's at Fight MMA Podcast. That's all one word. At Fight MMA Podcast on Twitter that we'll be doing this. Bob, this has been a blast. I've really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
We've set the bar kind of high, though. You bring in the ex-UFC heavyweight champion for your debut episode. Now we have to top it.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to see exactly what happens. So, well, tune in next week to see who we have sitting down with us on Fight and MMA Podcast.
I'm a white boy, and I'm jacked. Deal with it.